I always write about women who are a little ahead of their time, or they're in midlife and they're having to pivot and say, what am I going to do with my life now? What sort of skills do I have? I've raised a family. I've had children. I've juggled all of this, but can that translate into the workforce?
Welcome to the Leadership Chronicles. We're here to shine the spotlight on women leaders who are truly making a difference and a positive impact in the world. Every month, we have meaningful conversations where we delve into their incredible personal and professional journeys to reveal and share their lessons learned as they lead their businesses, their teams, their communities, their families, their lives, and the world. I'm Sherri Sklar, and I'm thrilled to be celebrating this incredible community of women.
And I am Sherri's co-host, Sarah Alter. We also hope to educate you, our audience, and those executives that can hire women, make them leaders, bring them onto boards, fund them as entrepreneurs, or just be there to support and empower them overall. By sharing their stories, we will all learn and grow as leaders and as people. Thank you for being a part of this journey in our community. And a special thank you to our sponsor, HBSWA, the phenomenal group of female Harvard Business School alumni from around the world.
Welcome, everybody, to our very first inaugural podcast, The Leadership Chronicles. We're so excited. Hey there, co-host Sarah. Nice to see you. Well, hello back to you, my friend. I am so excited to be with you. And today we have our very first guest of honor, Jan Moran, my dear friend from HBS. Jan, we go all the way back to HBS. Jan was right across the hall from me, second year in HBS. And who would have known all these years later, but there's an incredible story to be told about this wonderful person. And Jan, thank you so much for being with us as our guest of honor. Jan is a best-selling author of 35 books and has a TV series and owns and operates her own publishing and production company. And she has multiple chapters in her life, which is what's so fascinating about Jan. So before all of her current success, she's had multiple times of being an entrepreneur and a founder in the fragrance and the beauty industry. She was a pioneer in the touchscreen digital technology industry for retail stores. And just there's so much to be said about Jan's life. And that's why we wanted to spotlight Jan today to hear the full inception, from inception to now, what's gone on and how Jan has just crushed it in her career and life. And so with that, I wanted to say, welcome, Jan. It all started out with you and me being back at HBS together. Welcome, welcome.
Sure did. Thank you so much, Sherri. It's good to see you again. And Sarah as well. We ran into each other not too long ago at the HBS Women's Leadership Conference in Boston on
That's
campus.
right.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to check out our old dorm rooms, our old...
That was great. And so much fun.
Probably looks a lot better than when we were there.
Probably.
It always does, right?
Great fun.
Yeah.
Great fun. And what I love is to see where we've all of us, our paths that we have taken postgraduate school. And for myself, I took the entrepreneurial path, and others have taken other paths. But it's great fun to check in and see how we're all doing. I appreciate it.
So Jan, I know that, prior to HBS, you had a real estate and design business, correct? Yeah, one more of the entrepreneurial adventures that you've had. But what I find so fascinating is that you went to HBS as a single mom with a 10-year-old son. Now, I need to hear more about this because I barely made it through. I had gotten married and my husband was a year ahead, and it was just enough to deal with myself, let alone being a parent. So how did you navigate that?
Well, by then he was 9 when I started, 11 when I graduated. I'd already had 9 years experience. So for me, it was business as usual. And I might have been the only one at that at that year, I believe, might have been one other, but there were many of us out of 900. And others were married and had children. So I wasn't the only one juggling responsibilities. And, you, what I always say is you start from where you are and you do what you can. And that's what I did.
Yeah. Well, and so you were not only managing his schoolwork, but your own schoolwork. So I have to imagine there were many homework sessions at night together.
Well, we had a lot of family assistance, and I'm originally from Austin, Texas, and I did have family there that helped a great deal too.
Okay. So that is,
and now we live very close to each other. So, and now we're on the next generation. So
awesome. So while you were at HBS, was there any like one person or experience or learning or class that influenced you the most, both personally and professionally?
Well, my reason for going there was really to learn financial mastery of running a company. But there was so much there. It was a wealth of information. I remember Dr. Linda Hill in organizational behavior. At the time, we thought, oh, this is a soft class. It's all about relationships. And later post-graduation, you find it's all about relationships, isn't it? And who we work well with, the teams that we build, how we execute. That turned out to be one of the most important lessons that I took away.
Yeah. What are some of the other learnings that you had or dynamics that shaped who you are as a business leader today?
Well, I can say what was missing at that time. And there was an entrepreneurial course that we took that was very good, very good. But today there is the innovation lab. And that, I think, has been one of the most spectacular additions to the program. And anyone who's there today who can take advantage of that, I think that's an absolutely golden opportunity. I certainly would have had it been there in my year.
Yeah, you were such a pioneer early after you graduated. We didn't have the Rock Center of Innovation, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on then to your career post HBS, what was that next step you took?
Well, the next stop was to Deloitte. And I was there for 3 years in their management consulting program. And, fine company, but it just wasn't a good fit for me. I was more entrepreneurial. I wanted to create and execute on my ambitions.
Yeah, and we noticed that you jumped right into the fragrance and beauty business, which I think you had a big background in that, Jan. You have that in your family. How did you get started with the fragrance and beauty business?
Yes, I did have some experience prior to HBS in that. And I saw an opportunity in the market. And I might back up a little bit. Post Deloitte, I went to UCLA to their writers center, and I took fiction, screenwriting. So I first augmented my experience, my writing journey. And the next stop was that I wrote a book, a nonfiction book on women's fragrance, on perfumery. And this was, if you can imagine, this was before the internet. And that's how old we are, right? But anyway, that was before the internet.
We have no dates or years in this conversation.
You're right.
Yeah.
No, we said multiple years, but not how many.
That was early 90s. So it was an opportunity that I saw that was missing. There was a lot of product on the retail shelves. There was confusion in the marketplace. People didn't know, well, what does this do for me? What does this smell like? What kind of skincare solution are there out there? And so I took that. I knew that there was information. I flew to New York, spent a week at the Fragrance Foundation Library, researching perfumery, talking to perfumers, really augmenting the information the knowledge I already had. And that came together on a touch screen. And I hired a team to develop that on screen. I had a vision. I knew what it needed to look like and where it needed to be. And it was customer facing. And so people could help themselves, or a salesperson At Sephora, they call them cast members, of course, and they were able to interact on that screen and quickly pull up information for consumers, for customers, and bring that down, narrow that decision down in just a few seconds. So it
was the pioneering technology. I mean, at that point, nobody had that kind of technology in a retail store, I don't think. And just so the audience knows, this technology became the de facto standard for all of Sephora, over 400 stores. And I know, Jan, you had this vision that it was going to expand beyond that, because Sephora weren't they bought out by LVMH? And was it going to go that way as well? I mean, it was a huge vision. And let me also make sure I tell everybody that Jan also, with this knowledge of this technology, you concurrently, I think it was, developed the technology for Barnes & Noble. Over 350 college bookstores ended up having this technology that they use to communicate information to their customers. Tell us a little bit about that as well. You did both of those concurrently, right? You had two different arms of your operating company, or were they two separate companies?
Yes. It was two divisions within the company. And at the time, Sephora was owned by LVMH. So we serviced Sephora, and it was Sephora US, North America, including Canada, and then also Denmark. We would be in Paris quite often. Their sister company under LVMH umbrella was the duty-free stores. And so we were also servicing them in 5 languages, and they were based out of Hong Kong. So those solutions were for fragrance and skincare. We also pioneered some handheld devices. And I was looking at the entire ecosystem of communication with the customer, looping back into loyalty clubs, handheld devices, mobile, and so on. So it was really a 360 view on how do we best serve your customer, and being part of the team. The way I looked at it was, we weren't selling to them. We were working together to serve the customer.
Which is probably one of your hallmark, elements of success. How you approached that was, you're a partner, you're a collaborator, you understand their business better than anybody else. And I was just about to ask you, that to me seems like a kernel of knowledge here that you could pass on to a lot of other leaders, which is, and if you think back in terms of how you built this empire up, what do you think your keys to success were? If you were to look back and say, the keys that you developed for this.
Yes, I think I've always had the ability to put myself in the shoes of the customer, of the shopper, and to think, what is it that they want? Today we're taught, who's your avatar? And I think we've got more than one avatar. But one thing I know is that we're all time pressed. We all want to make quick decisions. We all want to feel certainty about those decisions. And it's understanding what the customer may want, what they need, how they're making those decisions, that it's also an emotional decision, perhaps aspirational. We all want those feelings of safety and acceptance, and a feeling of accomplishment. So those, I use a lot of psychology, and one of we had different ways to search and to find products and quizzes. And those quizzes I would base on psychology and on study, so that people could narrow their choices very quickly.
Well, and it's just that core principle of know thy customer, for they are not you, right?
Always. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But on top of understanding the customer, which is why it resonated so well and just took off, you also had a recurring revenue model. You had the way you structured the way the business would be successful. It paid for itself. I think, all the units were cash positive, as you operated each of the units. So tell us a little bit about those elements of the business and how that got to be so successful.
I set up a recurring revenue model. So it was a monthly fee per unit per store. And it was simple, very simple way, easy to understand, both from the customer's perspective as well as from our investor perspective. And just prior to the launch, we had a very successful test that had run and we were ready to deploy. And that was 07, 08. And of course, we all know what happened in the economic world at that time. And the banking relationship, very strong. They were ready to step up with some working capital. And just before that, they were taken over by the feds. Lesson I learned was have more than one strong banking relationship, which we didn't have, and it was going to be very difficult to create that kind of relationship in the very short time that we needed. So creativity, you've got to have creativity across all areas of your organization, and that goes for finance as well. So I was able to figure out how to get the units on a lease basis because my client had no capital expenditure, no CapEx available, just overnight. And so I really had to solve these problems for them as quickly as possible. And I also brought in venture capital at that time as well. And we were in the black. What we needed was just simply capital to execute, and that would pay for itself in a fairly short amount of time.
Well, the elements, you had all the right elements there, connection to the customer that nobody else had, then, a self-funding vehicle so that, it's cash positive all the time. So you attracted investors. I think the audience would be very interested to hear this because here you are, I don't know, where is this, in the early 90s, whatever it is, and you're a young woman out there developing this technology, this company, and you got investors to invest. Yeah. That's an amazing accomplishment, Jan. So how did you do that? Because I think even today, women struggle to get financing, and you were able to attract it right away. Help us understand how you did that.
Certainly. Actually, it was it was around 2007, 8.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's right. It was right after that. That's right.
I had run the company originally as
that's early.
As a publishing company for a number of years, which is how I developed relationships with the beauty retailers. So our first test was with Nordstrom. And so it helped having that entree. In terms of attracting venture capital, of course, having solid financials, I had an excellent CFO who is with me today on my current.
Oh, great.
Yes. Still publishing, but we're following a different path on this publishing.
It goes back to relationships again. Your point. Very good point.
Or the relationship, a great team. You've got a great team. You can figure out almost anything. And so having, as a writer, of course, I had a great business plan put together. And that did count. Just having a good financial model and a good exit strategy as well. Before I was getting venture capital on the fly, really.
Amazing.
Yes. Amazing. And originally I had not planned on that. So I really had to do a quick pivot in my strategy as well, because I knew that they were going to want it to exit and faster, of course, sooner than I had originally imagined. It all works out.
Yeah. Well, you make it seem easy, but it's not.
Right? Yeah. So you've had this successful exit and while you were building this incredible, service technology, you were still writing books, right? And I think, Sherri, you'd mentioned, Jan, you've written 35 books. You probably have one in the works. Let's unpack this next dimension of your career. Talk to us about your writing career. And then I want to move into, even now, TV.
Of course. Yes. I think I wrote my first novel in 7th grade. So I've always...
There you go.
Yes, always been a writer. That's been one of my superpowers. And I was the kid in the class who, when they said it was an essay exam, I was cheering because I knew I would nail that.
I love that.
Let me ask you, were you an English major or what did you major in undergrad?
No, I was not. I wanted to be an English major, but I went business instead simply because I had a child at that time and the starting salary was, it was more attractive. So it was a financial decision. But writing was,
Even then, when you were in college, undergrad, you were thinking about this. Amazing. Okay, Sarah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that was so much fun to hear that.
I was thinking she was an English major too, so I'm glad you asked that.
well, that was why I went back and augmented my my writing job.
At UCLA. Yeah, but back then you knew right away you were writing. So that is the cool, it was a thread throughout your life.
So 35 novels now. In fact, today's launch day for another one. And I put out 4 a year, generally. And
you just said four a year?
Yes. Now, in fairness, I write a lot of series. So those series, the world, the characters are already set. So I'm simply checking in, seeing how they're doing, seeing what their latest stories are, and then reporting those back to the readers. That's the way I look at it.
Again, she makes it sound so simple. But look behind Jan. Look at those books behind Jan. Those are her books.
Mm-hmm, yes. I've also written historical fiction as well. So I was writing while I was on those long transatlantic or transpacific flights. And frankly, I ran out of movies to watch. And so and this was before we could watch everything on our phone. And so I started writing, and this was a way I found it very relaxing, entertaining. And I looked forward to those trips when I'd have a few hours to myself to write. And that's how, so when the company was sold, I immediately jumped into that and got a 2-book deal with St. Martin's Press for my first historicals. And that laid the foundation as well for my global translations. Those books went into 12 different languages across Europe. And some of those publishers I still work with today on my current catalog. So it was, yes.
And you've stayed focused on the perfumery and fashion industries, right? As far as the series that you're writing, is there any new dimension that's going to be coming our way?
Actually, the first book was a World War saga centered on a French perfumer, which was rare. I always write about women who are a little ahead of their time, or they're in midlife and they're having to pivot and say, what am I going to do with my life now? What sort of skills do I have? I've raised a family. I've had children. I've juggled all of this, but can that translate into the workforce? And that's what a lot of women are faced with today. Yeah. Even if your marriage is still holding solid, and that's great, then there are other things. There's lifestyle changes. Suddenly you've got an empty nest. The kids are gone. They don't need you as much anymore, except when they need money, right? Yeah. Or emotional support. Let's be real. But it's, a lot of us go through chapters in our lives. And when we're on that precipice, when we see new opportunities, what do we do? How do we approach that? That's the part of the women's journey that I'm interested in, is the recreation process. So that's what I write about, and that's what struck a chord.
You struck a chord. It resonates with so many. I mean, it's a universal feeling. And I just have to say, Jan, you have this innate sense of being able to tap into what people are feeling and what they're experiencing in their lives. And that's why it's so universal.
Is there a character or characters in any of your books that are manifesting you and what you've experienced?
Yeah, my characters are all fictional characters. Occasionally I'll have a real walk-on character, maybe Coco Chanel in one of my first books. But mainly I write beach books. And I think that authors, we always we're humans. Our humanity is going to infuse every book that we write, but none of them are me in particular. Now, they might also enjoy swimming, or they might have a dance background, or they might have one of my favorite characters is Ginger Delavie from my Coral Cottage series. And Ginger was now she's one of my older characters. Yes, Ginger Delavie is in her 80s. She was a Cold War code breaker, and she is smart as a whip. And she was a woman ahead of her time. And in fact, she grew up in a small beach town in Southern California where the series is set. And what's interesting about her is that she never went to school, she went to high school, but never had the opportunity for higher education, because at that time, her father sent her brothers to school, but she was expected to tutor them and help them, to be the helpmate to them. But for her path was clearly marriage, and an education would simply be wasted on her. And that was the thinking at that time. So one thing I love to do is to write about different eras and write about women from different eras. So we've got women in their 20s, in their 30s, their 40s, in their 60s and 80s. And it's as much about their journey as it is the main character's journey. So we are, my books are multi-generational. And some of them we also reach back to the 20s or the 40s or the 50s. So we're seeing not only how society thought at those times, what were the societal norms then, but also what were the laws? What were the laws regarding marriage and divorce, banking? There was a time when women, and banks are regulated, by state. And so the laws back in the 1930s, 40s, they were different than they are today. And there were times when women could not have bank accounts in their own names, or they had difficulty withdrawing money, maybe their own money that they had inherited from family.
Wasn't it up until like the 1970s that women had to have a man co-sign or something for them to have a loan? Is that correct, Jan? Or Sarah, do you know?
Right?
Yeah. The exact year, but yes, that's correct. And if you were
crazy.
All money, your husband or your father or your brother, if you didn't have either of those, would get a call saying, "Is this all right?" And would need their permission to do so. So if you were a woman in business, think about this. If you were a woman in business at that time, it added another wrinkle to your to your experience, and that's what I like to write about. So I've written about women running a vineyard, for example, in one of them, in the winemakers, a woman running a vineyard in the 1950s in Napa Valley, and then also with some scenes in Italy. And so we've got different cultures, we've got different eras.
So fascinating. You got something for everybody.
And different channels now too, right?
Yes,
So you've moved beyond print, you've got ebook, you're producing TV. Talk to us about how you've pivoted yet again,
Yes, I write my books. My historicals, of course, are broad and sweeping. My beach series are typically taking place at one location with a limited cast. So I created this world so that it would be easy to bring to screen. And my goal is to reach as many people as possible. And if I can do that through books, great. But I know that I can reach more on through the big.
And Jan, tell us about the fact that you developed your own production company. Is that right? I mean, you created your own publishing, your own production company. Why did you do that? Like, why was that important to you?
For creative control and financial control. And it's the first deal that I've done is a 10-book series with a major television producer. I'll be executive producer on that. And that is, of course, there's a lot of work that goes on before it hits the screen. But what they were looking for was very deep content, 10 books. And I'm still writing in that series. that's the Summer Beach Sea Breeze Inn series.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one with an indie producer is The Winemakers. And that is a 1950s saga that's set in Napa Valley. And that one is also in the works. I had the pleasure of writing the screenplay, laying out the episodes, creating the series Bible, and in fact, even securing some of the talent. So I did quite a bit of work on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're saying that by owning your own production and publishing, you can control more of the decisions that go into, you're getting involved, what you want to see happen. Whereas if you went another route and you sold, I don't know exactly how it would work, to some other publishing company or production company, you wouldn't maybe have as much say or as much control over the way the content was produced, or is that right?
Yes. And of course, those contracts are very detailed and they vary. So I'll have more control and more input into the winemakers with an indie producer than I do with the Seabreeze and Summer Beach series. And they're different contracts. So
Sure.
into all of that, but that the levels of input and control do vary, and that's according to contract. But I do have full audiobook production and distribution. I also distribute we're up to 3 different languages now, with more coming. And I will partner with publishers and producers if it makes sense, and if it warrants, the production warrants it, of course. But then there are others that I'd like to go forward on my own. So yeah.
But what's so key is you own the content, right?
Correct.
Like as we've seen, like with our Shiro Taylor Swift, right? In the past year or two, what's so key is owning that content.
Yes, in fact, I had when I negotiated the contract with St. Martin's Press, I had a clause there that where I could regain control of that content based on certain points. And so, of course, that occurred. I brought the content back and was able to republish that. So as often as possible, I'm bringing content back into house. But that said, I also have another opportunity, perhaps, that I'm following. And so again, it's a deal by deal. Deal by deal.
And maybe just last question on this chapter. And I love too, Jan, when we were chatting earlier, you referred to your journey as a silver platter. And I love that. Because it's a bit of a buffet, but it served on a silver platter. But what would be, from this chapter, what would be that key, business lesson that you take away?
Well, for me, at this time, it's really owning and controlling the content. It's assembling the team. Someone I admire a great deal in what she's done is Reese Witherspoon, who formed her company.
Yeah, I would totally agree.
So mine is following a similar path. You mentioned Taylor Swift, also again having her own content.
She's
retaining it.
And also she reaches multi-generational women or people, all generations seem to love her as well. As I can see how all generations love your content, Jan. It's amazing how you make it so applicable to everybody.
Right. Well, and it's like you're truly celebrating the power of women, right? Like it's, love that and all that you're doing as you write and create all this content and share these stories. Just a fascinating career journey. And
yes.
I know Sherri and I are in awe of you.
We are. Bravo, Jan.
Accomplished.
And Jan, you gave us that picture of you and John Legend. You won some award. Tell us about that.
That was the Fifi Award for Innovation, and that was from the Fragrance Foundation in New York. And that was a very deep honor, a special evening.
And John Legend presented that to you, or is that how it happened? Oh, that's so funny. That is beautiful. What a
sweet.
Yeah. We're gonna post that in our links where we're gonna post this podcast so everybody can see. Jan and John together.
And you look so elegant there. Well, listen, Jan, we're starting a new tradition with our podcast. So we're always going to end our podcast with rapid fire fun questions. So are you up for quick one-liner type questions that we can throw at you? Okay, you're in the hot seat. I'm going to start off, and Sarah, you can, follow me, but I'm going to say, okay, Jan, what would you say the biggest obstacle you had to overcome to achieve your goals?
Biggest obstacle. Generally putting together the financing.
And you did it.
No small task. You already answered the one question that we had down here. So I'm going to go off script on you, Jan. So forgive me, because it was favorite female character and you said Ginger. But I was going to ask you this earlier. What's your favorite scent that you wear?
Oh my goodness. When I write, particularly historicals, I will immerse myself in the period. So it may be music, it may be scent. Mitsuko is one that I wore while I was writing my first novel.
How would you describe it? Like, what type of a scent is it?
It is, I'd call it warm, rich, it's embracing.
Like you.
Indeed. All right, Sherri, your turn.
Okay. What's the most inspiring thing you've seen another leader do?
Definitely Reese Witherspoon in putting together Hello Sunshine. That's $1 billion company now. She saw an opportunity in the marketplace, a dearth of women, both in front on the screen and behind the screen. And so her goal was to put together a company that brought quality women's stories to the screen. That's my goal as well. I am a storyteller at heart, and those are stories that are important for women today, but also to look back historically. One of the most common questions I get from younger readers is that true? Were things really like that then? Did we not have access to credit at that time? This blows their minds. And we lived it. We lived it. My mother lived it. She wept. She received her first credit card. I remember that. And so we are, we talk about financial power, but also this power that we have of storytelling and sharing our experiences is a true power as well.
Awesome. Now, you certainly have done a tremendous amount to help tell the story about and how powerful women can be. Yeah. You just bring it to life. God bless. So, Sarah, did you have one last quick rapid fire?
I'm going to end it with one more. What is that secret talent that nobody knows you have?
We're going to expose it here.
Well, my mother was in the Houston Ballet, and so I grew up in dance. And my granddaughter is in dance, little dance. And she's fabulous, of course. But still, I can still do my pirouettes, tourgettes, and play tunes. So yes.
What? Okay, you are so multi-talented. I love this. Well, sadly, we have to let you go.
It's been a pleasure. Thank
you. Such a pleasure and a joy.
You're a joy. It is true. And I'm so glad that we picked you to be our very first podcast guest. You're fascinating and so rich with so much that you have offered the world, that you've given the world. And I hope we have uncovered a little bit of your story today for everybody to hear. And we're going to have, a link to your books and, just information about you. And we're just so thrilled that you were here with us. Thank you so much for sharing your story. We loved having you.
Thank you, Sarah. Always a pleasure to see the two of you. And I hope we meet in person again soon.
I can't wait. Can't wait to hug you.
And as Sherri has shared to the gracious audience who listened today, fear not, we are going to post monthly episodes, and you can find all of our episodes at hbswa.org/podcast. So until next month, have a good one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jan.